Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Now I actually wanted to do this a little bit old school style with a little talking head video and set up my normal camera. I know I did the thing with the smartphone the other day, but I wasn't too big a fan of the quality of it. But that also reminded me that I actually wanted to get a new tripod, one of the ones with the adjustable necks so that you can move it up and down, especially for Expo. I wanted to make sure I had that available to me, so I have ordered it from Amazon and hopefully I'll have it in tomorrow. So we'll have plenty of time to be able to take advantage of it and use it for Expo. But I figure since I couldn't manage that, I would do a recording, do a little screen grab, because I wanted to share with you a couple of things that I was looking into because I've been having some fun. Obviously, I did the videos on the different grading things this week. We did a little bit of CSG, and then we did the PSA one with the price, with the special, with the monthly special, basically that they did in order to do that. There was also a little bit of a shuffling at the at PSA up at the top. Kevin Linane is being moved into a new position, but that really to me doesn't warrant its own video. It's a little bit of it's interesting for folks that observe the industry a little bit, but I don't think day to day it's going to make much of a difference to you. So I didn't think that was worthy of its own video. But anyway, I want to chat on a couple of things that kind of play into those videos and also the comments about those videos. And I've also been checking out some of the videos lately that Baubles and Ball Cards have been making. Having a little bit of fun with some grading stuff. And I also watched the latest episode of listened to the latest episode of the Card Chatter with Baubles and Refractor Jones. And Baubles was talking about a lot of the main points that also kind of play into where this video is going to go a little bit. I wanted to go in a different direction because there are certain comments and certain tenor of comments when it comes to third-party grading, when it comes to breakers, when it comes to a variety of different things in the hobby that actually come up over and over again. That's why I say it's not just focused on grading, also breakers, also the manufacturers, also a variety of different things in the hobby that people talk about. And they use the same kind of verbiage in it. And I want to kind of have a discussion about that because I've kind of responded in different ways over time, but the responses always stick within a certain theme and a certain parameter. And rather than repeat it again, because I do that on the live stream all the time, Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern time, but instead of doing it the way that I always do, I thought it'd be kind of fun to have a standalone video where I could actually talk about this, but I'll cite a couple of things that I found because I was puttering around trying to find something that could kind of back up what I've already been describing, but with some kind of a source or a citation that I could give you so that we'd have a little different perspective on it. So what I found is actually a website called uxmyths.com, and I'll link to this in the description. So there's two specific ones that I actually want to share with you. And this is one of them. So I'll quickly go in here. And there's a whole bunch of them here and a variety of different ones that are actually very interesting and kind of fun. But I want to focus on two. I want to focus on myth number 29 and myth number 21. And I'll get into them here and kind of talk about how they play into the hobby and kind of what I'm talking about. And by the way, I do enjoy that on some of the things they cite here because they don't just list it out. They will also show you a couple of citations, including from books and things. And in a lot of cases, I've read a lot of these books, but I didn't cite them directly because, in all honesty, I couldn't remember which one I found it in. So it was nice to have a site like this where they explained it in this way. So myth 29, people are rational. And you'll see kind of where that plays into this one. I want to focus on the other myth a little bit more, but this one I want to focus on for a second. People don't make purely rational decisions based on careful analysis of cost and expected utility. Despite what classical economics taught us, research findings confirm that our decisions are driven more by our emotions than logical and conscious thinking. Now, at that point, I could just stop. In all honesty, I could just stop right there, record scratch, and we're done. This conversation's over. I could basically just point to this and say, hobby, this is you. Basically that covers it. So when I'm looking at a lot of this stuff, the reason that I point to something like this is that when you think about videos like the ones that I'm talking about and you look at the comments section, you'll see a certain tenor, like I said, of comments and responses. And it'll be a variety of different things where people will make these broad, statements that talk about basically something that they're trying to state it as if it's just some kind of fact. But in reality, when you actually go into it and listen to it, it's your opinion based on your emotional response. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I'll borrow one from one of Baubles' videos here, and I'll cite them if they want to be cited. But for now, I'll just read the general tenor of it. And this is, by the way, a comment that I've seen in like 100 different iterations. I think X will surpass PSA in the long run as number one, which, by the way, is totally possible. And I'll get to that in a second. But I want to focus in on that. So the response continues. The non-consistency in grading and upcharges with PSA will be their downfall. So I've seen like 100 variations of this. The blind loyalty that PSA has had with past collectors is not the case anymore, as a lot of people are starting to see through the BS. This kind of comment is what I like to call is this time is different. And if you can imagine from that phrase right there, this time is different, it's always different. And then it ends up the same. Now, to be clear, does that mean I think that PSA can't be knocked off number one? Absolutely not. 100% can. It wasn't number one the whole time. It's number one right now. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be different before. Things can change and things can move around and they can all shuffle and change positions. But right now, as these people say that, and they say this is not the case anymore, if we go over to GemRate, June, 887,000 cards. July, 1 million cards. August, 895,000 cards. September, almost 1.1 million cards. In October, 1 million cards submitted and processed through PSA that are in the POP report. And I want to make really clear, when I'm talking about the October numbers, that's what's in the POP report, because that's how GemRate pulls its data. Now, you can quibble about individual days and weeks and whatever, but when it comes to the monthly data, I'm pretty comfortable that if it's getting put in the POP report, it's at least a representative, within reason, of the capacity of what they're doing in a given month. And you can see the gap between them. Like in even this example here, PSA was down 3%, so it was negligible. CSG went up 49%, but they broke it up between CSG and then also CGC. Well, if you're looking at it, it's still a gigantic gap between this one and this one. SGC went up 17%, but SGC had been over 100,000 back in June, and they're at 81,000 here, and they were moving up and down, jumping up and down. But the reality of it is that SGC has been solid, and I'll get back to SGC here in a minute. Like I said, I'm going to use the grading one as one example, but I'll touch on a couple of other examples. The point is, people are seeing through this BS, but they're submitting anyway. You're trying to insert rationality. You're trying to insert all these things that you believe, oh, well, obviously, logically. It's like, well, great. That might be a factor for you. But other folks are looking at it and going like, does it serve my purpose? And you're presuming and you're interjecting yourself. You're projecting onto other people what you think they would be doing. But then in reality, the numbers don't back you up. Now, one other thing I'm going to point out is that this doesn't actually include the most recent price decrease, really. And it also doesn't include the monthly special they just did now. So anything that comes in at the $15 rate that people start submitting in, I can tell you I'm going to grab a couple extra cards myself for my own submission that's coming up here at the expo. I'm going to put in a couple extra cards in there, and I'm going to submit to it just because it makes my life easier. And I can just drop it off and get it done. And I can wait for a while for those because a lot of the cards that I'm submitting are PC anyway, so I'm not in a hurry. But that said, if you wanted your stuff back a little bit quicker and wanted reliable grading and all that, well, you could go with SGC. You could take advantage of CSG, and right now the great deal they've got in terms of pricing. But even with that stuff intact, there is still a gap between these different companies. Can the gap be narrowed? 100%. Can it change down the road? Totally. But it won't change overnight. We're not going to jump where PSA is number one here and then one of these other guys take their spot next month. It's not going to be like that. It can be an erosion over time, but it's not going to be flipping the switch and then suddenly we're doing it. That's why I say, like, a lot of these people are trying to interject this. It's like a lot of the stuff that you're complaining about has been in place for a long time. It's not like it just started. And there was even a time where PSA shut down and SGC had a chance, and then they had their moment, and then they got overwhelmed. And since then, they've done an excellent job building themselves back up. They've done an excellent job promoting themselves. But even then, regardless, they're still operating at a fraction. It's still, this right here is kind of the high watermark in the recent efforts. 100,000 per month is a lot of cards. But if you break it down, say about 20 working days, that's about 5,000 a month. And right now it's about 4,000. So they kind of hover in around these numbers. Again, day to day, it can change and shift around. But the point is, that's kind of where they settled in. Can they grow it over time? Of course, they totally can. But the point is that why, when this company has a very competitive rate, and I can use the same for CSG, Beckett less so, but I can use SGC and say, okay, competitive rate, great turnaround time, from all accounts, great customer service. How come the gap isn't narrower? Well, that's not necessarily what people are caring about. And the reason I know this is because when PSA initially took its drop down in price, and when Beckett did its special, and when CSG has been putting its price down, what's the thing that happened when SGC was still at $30 for a while? People were asking, oh, SGC, when are you going to lower your price? You only asked to lower the price because you're saying the $30 is too high for your perceived value of the product. That isn't to say SGC did a bad job. They haven't done a bad job. But if they were hanging in there and getting the same kind of capacity they're getting right now at $30, they would have kept it up at $30. Why would you lower the price if you don't have to? It's one of those things that you're doing it. Right now, everybody else is also trying to be competitive, but at the same time, PSA is one example, has a unique problem. They have so much capacity, they want to keep the wheel moving. So it's not good enough to simply have it at the level that it's at, because you could have it drop off and still be extremely successful in this marketplace. But having 1 million plus cards means that the wheel keeps moving consistently and you're using a lot of your capacity. Your goal is not to use 100% of your capacity ever, because if you have suddenly a high month or something, you want to have a little capacity to be able to handle it without necessarily getting stuck. But at the same time, you also don't want everybody sitting around idling. That's kind of your goal. So you want to find that equilibrium price point where you can get enough stuff in to keep the wheels moving, but at the same time, be able to get stuff out the door. And that's kind of what you're going to do. So again, I'll go back to what I said a moment ago. Can PSA be dropped off at number one? 100%. But it's not going to be an overnight thing. And it's not going to be for the reasons that you guys are talking about, because a lot of that stuff has already been in place for a while. It's only going to be when the people that are submitting and getting what they want out of it stop getting something out of it, and one of the other propositions becomes a little bit more viable for them, and that's how they're going to get more inroads. Because again, if it's just a matter of being competitive and having a quick turnaround time and everything, SGC has literally been doing that for months, quite a while now, and it hasn't really put much of a dent in it at all. And right now, in terms of categories, and Bobbles has done a good job kind of mentioning this as well, and I'll give him credit for it. When you do a breakdown, sports and miscellaneous, so this right here is more sports cards and miscellaneous. You can see the gap in that sense. Well, you can see here, in terms of TCG and non-sport, PSA actually has quite a good percentage in terms of that category. And that's a category that could potentially be a growing category with Pokemon and a lot of these other gaming cards. So the reality is that is a great stronghold. Right now, this is comfortably more than a lot of these other companies are doing. You can see SGC is all the way down here at the bottom. So look at the gap between this and this. It's gigantic. Now, these other ones, like look, CGC is actually a very strong competitor in this space. So again, you could break down these numbers 10 ways from Sunday, but that's kind of one point. But again, people are rational. That is a myth. And the hobby proves this. Let me get away from grading for a second. Thinking about, breakers. Well, why would anybody use breakers? Well, it works for some people. They like doing it that way. They like gambling. They like pursuing it in that way. They've got their own reasoning for it. Why does Backyard Breakers still have business even after all the controversies they've had? Some people don't care. Some people are perfectly aware of all the things they've done or been accused of and still don't care and still give them money. The hobby and people are not rational. That's kind of the way it is. That's one item, one explanation. And by the way, I do recommend the book, Predictably Irrational. It's actually a very interesting read. It is kind of a fun way. Now, there are a couple of examples. Like I said, what I like about this site is that it actually cites some really good stuff. So let me give you an example here. People are bad at comparing things in an absolute way. In an experiment, participants were asked to choose from differently priced offers. The experimenters found that they could double the sales of an expensive offer by simply adding another similarly priced offer that was inferior in quality. The offer was a so-called decoy whose only purpose was to influence people to buy the original item. Now, can I give you guys a quick, I'll give you guys a quick example of this kind of an action. Back earlier in my career, before I really started getting going, working more of a white collar job and kind of an office space and doing my thing that I'm doing now. I've been doing this for a while now, but before I was doing any of that, I was doing a run where I was working a variety of different retail jobs. And one of them that I worked in was a kind of media liquidation store. So I would call it a liquidation store. Basically, they would buy pallets and pallets and pallets of, different kinds of media, DVDs and Blu-rays as well. To be honest, they had those as well. And even some HD DVD, if you guys remember that format. But in addition to a variety of different types of computer games and software. So a lot of that stuff. And at the company at the time, actually, were the one who were supplying, if you've ever were at Walmart and you remember those bins of like $5, Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff like that, they would actually supply that stuff. So they would buy pallets and pallets and pallets of this and resell it. So that was one of the things. They had a little storefront beside the warehouse at the time, and I worked there. But one of the things that we had in there, and honestly, the store was very, very low traffic because we were in the middle of a commercial area. So really nobody came in most of the time. But when we did do some business, it was, be people buying bulks of different things. Well, one thing we had, and I guess this is ahead of our time because now you got Beckett has its VHS category. We had pallets of VHS, a whole section of tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 VHS tapes. You can't even imagine. I didn't even want to venture over there because of the amount of stuff that was there. But, well, I'll tell you, when a store isn't doing much foot traffic, you get kind of bored. So you try to find ways to amuse yourself, or you try to find things to do to keep yourself busy. Busy work just to do what you needed to do. And I worked there for about a year, so we found a lot of different busy work and we managed. But one of the things that I did is I decided right around Halloween time, so it's appropriate given the season we're in, we just came out of Halloween. But around Halloween time, one of the things that I noticed when I went through that VHS section, and Lord knows I wasn't going to sort through that stuff, but as I walked through and just looked around, I realized that they had a pretty good collection of horror movies, including a variety of the well-known horror series. You had the Friday the 13th, you had the Nightmare on Elm Street, and there's a train, for bonus train for those who like that. But you had a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street, you had the Friday the 13th, you had the Halloweens and all that stuff. But what I decided to do is actually, we had a couple of boxes, and for whatever reason, I don't remember why we had them, but we had boxes that could actually hold 10 VHS tapes. And here's what I need you to understand. So these VHS tapes were 50 cents each. That's what we were selling them for, 50 cents each. And if you bought a whole stack ton of them, we'd knock a little bit more off just so you could take them out. Because people would come in and buy them, and then they would take them home, and then they'd put them through the VHS to DVD converter, and they would actually burn them onto a DVD and basically get the movie for 50 cents. And people like to do that, so to each their own. The point is that we would sell through quite a bit of it, but we had pallets and pallets and pallets, and it seemed like an endless supply of that stuff. The point is, I got bored one day and decided to have a little bit of fun, and I kind of bet my buddy that was there at the store, and I said, okay, look, I think I can pull this off. I'm going to go grab a bunch of these horror movie things, and I'm going to put them together in a little package, a bundle. So I decided I would grab 10. Now, if you're doing your quick math here, you're going to realize 50 cents per 10, that's $5. Great. So I would grab the 10 and I'd stuck them together. I'd do like the Halloweens together and the Friday the 13th together, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd grab a stack of 10 and grab a couple of series and put them into this little bundle. And I slapped a $10 sticker on them. And I think I put together about 4 or 5 of them because we had duplicates of a bunch of it. We actually had tons of that stuff. The point is, technically speaking, anybody with any common sense would tell you, you can literally get these for 50 cents per. It's $5 worth of VHS tapes. I slapped a $10 sticker and put them in a box. Do you have any idea how quickly we sold out of those? Like, they didn't even last, I think, an hour. And literally they sold because people would rather walk up, oh, it's already here. Boom, grab it, $10, done. And I just sat there and laughed. I go, okay, great. I think I ended up putting a couple more of those packages together and sold them off at $10 a pop. But I doubled our sales for that stuff for that time period. But again, there's no rationality to that. People are bad at comparing things. Literally, you could have walked in and created your own version of that for $5. That's all you had to do. But you had to walk over to the section. In this case, I put them together for you and put them in a box and slapped a $10 sticker on the side of it, and we called it a day. So, again, people are not rational that way. It's kind of weird, but it plays out in reality. So that's one example. People are rational being a myth. Now, other reason that kind of plays well into hobby, and this one is my favorite. And this one plays well for the third-party grading and a variety of other things. It plays well into the manufacturers, products, all kinds of stuff. Myth 21. People can tell you what they want. Now, this is a really good one. I love this one, and there's some really good examples in this one. I love it. When asking people, you have to be aware that people make confident but false predictions about their future behavior, especially when presented with a new or unfamiliar design. So this is focusing on design, but I want to understand here. Many organizations still rely on asking people what changes they'd like to see in their website or service, neglecting historical research failures like New Coke or the Air Chair. So when you get focus groups together, they are terrible at it. And they make emphasis here. That's not to say you should quit listening to your customers, but make sure you know what to ask and how to interpret it. So one of the fun things about this is you have to understand it. When you go through a lot of these, and there's a bunch of examples here. Now, this one is great because it includes some excerpts out of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, which is actually a really good one. I've got a chance to read that one as well. So New Coke is a great one. Despite thousands of sip tests and countless efforts to fine-tune the taste based on customer feedback. So understand, they had people try it and tell them what they liked, what they didn't like about it, all that. New Coke was a disaster. They ended up having to do Coca-Cola Classic, if any of you remember that. And eventually they just dropped the Classic and returned it to the original formula. But in this example here, Gladwell contends that when people say they like these tests may not reflect what they will actually buy to sit at home and drink over a week. So you have to understand that people will tell you they want X, they want Y, and then you give them X and Y and wonder why they don't run to it. They don't run to it, they don't clamor to it. They say these words. And here's another good example that I'll give you that's just a fun one. It cost Walmart $1.85 billion to listen to what their customers said. So basically what happened is they asked their customers if they wanted them to declutter the store. So they spent money to do that, then lost $1.85 billion in sales, and then basically had to undo it. So this is actually a really fun one. Because conceptually, people tell you what they tell you what they think they want, or they tell you what they think they're expected to want. Now, that isn't to say we ignore it to this point, but the reason I kind of use this example is, and that's why I gave you that comment earlier about the third-party grader where they said, I think X is going to pass PSA in the long run. Again, that can totally happen. And again, all those points that they made were totally reasonable. There have been criticisms of PSA forever, literally forever. So why? So the question we get all the time, why do people still use X? Why do people still do Y? And my answer is because it doesn't matter what they say, it's what they do. Your actions are the important part. Your actions are the real thing. So that's why I read the comments and things like that, but I only take them with a grain of salt because it's like, oh, well, I would never use this. Like, well, fair enough. If you're not using it, that sounds awesome. Sounds great. Then you're voting with your wallet. You're doing your job. At that point, you have done all you can. But then running around in comment sections saying, well, I would never. It's like, that's great. Back to what I said earlier. 900,000 basically. 900,000 basically. So other people are. Even if you're not, other people are. You know, even if you're not, other people are using backyard breakers and breaking with them. Even if you're not, other people are buying new product X. So, you know, they're buying that card set that's overpriced. They're buying that box that's overpriced. They're, you know, sitting in line doing, you know, to wait for this, or they're playing around against bots. And they're like all these things that everybody in the hobby likes to complain about. People do them over and over and over again. And then you wonder why. Because they can say, oh, well, we want this, we want this, we want this. If it was just a matter of that, going back to what I said earlier, if it was just a matter of, oh, you know, we hate having the turnaround times be like this. Okay. SGC has really good turnaround time. Oh, we want the price to be. The price is very competitive. Oh, but we want customer service. Well, the customer service so far, from what I understand, is pretty good. I don't use them myself. Again, it's not my favorite holder, but I have no hesitation to buy SGC slabs. They're credible to me. I have no issue with that. So why aren't you guys submitting 10,000, 20,000 cards a day to them? Why aren't you doing that? Because you, as an individual, are going to do what you're going to do. You're going to pursue it in the way you're going to, you may have whatever feelings you're going to have, but you're still going to look at your case study and say to yourself, this is what I need out of this. And as long as I'm getting what I need out of this, we're good. That's why I say it's kind of an interesting perspective to look at it from when, you know, like I do this stuff with PSA Canada. And when I do that with them, they're a bulk submitter. They're not PSA itself, but they work with PSA closely as a bulk submitter. But what happens is I get a chance to see one perspective and one angle of one specific marketplace. It's a small sample size, so we don't give sweeping generalizations based on that. But I can tell you based on a small sample size that when we see a price reduction, when they went to $18, there was an uptick in submissions. Seems straightforward, fair enough. And we saw, and when they had the TCG special for $15, we saw an uptick in TCG cards, Pokemon and the like. So you saw an uptick in that. So the price did, you know, the price change did matter. And they get a pretty decent amount of cards that go through them. So there is a likelihood that other bulk submitters also get a similar kind of thing. So it's one of those things that you know, the proof is in the pudding. People will tell you with their dollars what they're actually doing. But when we see the math and we look at it and go like, well, why do they do? Well, because it worked for them. It did the job for them. It doesn't mean it's the best choice. It doesn't mean they're doing the best job. It just means they're serving the purpose that that audience or those customers are looking for. When it ceases to do that, then the numbers will adjust accordingly, and then you'll see the difference, and maybe it'll level out a little bit more. I think competition in the space, as I've said before, is really good. And as long as it's legitimate competition, I think that makes it better for everybody because it encourages everybody to get better. But in the same vein, that's why I kind of look at it, and I look at it with kind of a side eye. When people look at the examples of these new pop-up graders that basically have no track record, they've done nothing, but they come in with a million promises, and a bunch of people run out to go and try to give them money. And then I go look at it, I go, why are you giving them money? It's like, well, we got to give them a chance. It's like, well, giving them a chance is letting them play it out in the market and let's see what happens. Giving them a chance isn't necessarily giving them money. I'm not running to give somebody money that I've never heard of, that has never done anything. I don't feel a sense of experimentation on that. I look at it, I'm not getting free samples here. I'm not getting free grading just to try it, quote unquote. That isn't how this is working. I actually have to give you money. So I want you to already have an established product, or I want to know the product I'm going to get is what I'm going to get before I start trying to spend money with you guys. It's kind of the opposite. The idea is like, oh, well, let us earn your business. Like, well, you're not going to earn my business by me giving you money. I have to watch other people basically run through the gamut, go through the hoops, whatever that's going to be. And down the road, I'll look at it again. And that's kind of the approach that I'll take with any new product in the space, a new platform or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So it's one of those things that's a little bit weird because people will tell you what they want, but then when it comes time, they don't necessarily translate to it. I gave you all the SGC things, but what about CSG? CSG took some graders that are credible. They have financial backing. They have, in my opinion, the nicest looking holder in the space. Why aren't they a lot closer to the top line here? Why aren't they up here? Why is it CGC that has to carry the load to get them closer to where PSA is, as opposed to them being like a 200,000 or 300,000 and taking some of PSA's market share directly from them? Because for whatever reason, their secondary market value isn't there. Why isn't the secondary market value there? Because the consumer confidence is not there yet. Can it change in the future? Sure, it can. But that's going to be what's actually required. It's a chicken or the egg thing. And you need that in order to then prompt people to be more inclined, because what they're looking for isn't necessarily the nicest holder. What they're looking for isn't necessarily the most consistent grader. What they're looking for isn't necessarily the fastest turnaround, because if it was, then the number one would not be the one that is number one right now, because they are not any of those things. That's kind of the funny thing. They can tell you that's what they want, but with their dollars, they're telling you something else entirely. And that's why I kind of, I chuckle. I look at it and say like, well, but you're seeing it over and over again. And here, another big point here. There's a huge difference between imagining using something and actually using it. In addition, human preferences are rather unstable. There's some really good points and some really good items here. And I would, honestly, if you get a chance, take a look at some of these examples. And I like this one. This was a good one. I'll leave you with this one, and then I'll give some final thoughts. In his TED Talk on spaghetti sauces, Malcolm Gladwell argues the food industry made a big mistake asking people about their preferences and conducting focus groups. Gladwell says that the mind knows not what the tongue wants. If I asked all of you, for example, in this room, what you want in a coffee, you know what you'd say? Every one of you would say, I want a dark, rich, hearty roast. It's what people almost always say when you ask them what they want in a coffee. What do you like? Dark, rich, hearty roast. What percentage of you actually like a dark, rich, hearty roast? According to Howard, somewhere between 25 and 27% of you. Most of you like milky, weak coffee. But you will never say that to someone who asks what you want, that I want a milky, weak coffee. That kind of plays into what I said a couple minutes ago, where even when you're doing a focus group or giving an opinion or whatever, you can have the most strong opinion in the world. The majority of you are not following through on that opinion. You're actually saying almost what you think somebody else would expect you to say. And then when it comes time to spend your money, you're spending it however you're going to spend it anyway. And other people the loudest ones will be the ones that say, no, I do it this way. That's great. But the numbers don't back you up. You're in the minority. So congratulations to you, but you are in the minority. The majority of people are falling into, as long as it does what I want it to do, as long as it is serving the purpose that I want it to serve, and it does what I want, then that's what I'm going to use. And I'm not going to run around necessarily and use a bunch of other stuff just because, technically it's a better option, quote unquote. But that's kind of what's interesting about the psychology of it. That's the reason why I wanted to include some of these things, because the hobby is very much emotionally run. That's why I said here a moment ago. The first myth that I cited, people are irrational. They're not. They operate completely irrationally. And I see it all the time, comment section and conversations we have. Now, I'll finish off on this one because it's one of my favorites. One of the most common comments that we'll talk about when we talk about, even when I do the PSA Canada show or when I do my own live stream on my own channel and do all those things, is the upcharges. Everybody hates the upcharges. 150% of the time, everybody hates the upcharges. Now, Carlos, are you going to argue for upcharges? No, I'm not. I'm not going to tell you they're good. And I'm not going to tell you they're justified. If you ask me, just in conversation, hey, Carlos, why do you think the upcharges are? My answer to you is going to be like, money. It's a means to an end. It's a way of making more money. Oh, but, that's not good. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. That's not my concern. My point to you is that's why it's being done. It is an opportunity to make more money. But they can't do that. Yes, they can. They 100% can. Not even because of the position they're in the marketplace. And I think that's where people get it twisted. They're like, well, they wouldn't do this if they weren't number one. Maybe not, maybe not. But the point is that they're doing it because that is the way they've decided to make some of their money in that space. The point is that as a consumer, you have the option not to use it for that reason. And a lot of people very loudly like to remind you that, oh, well, I would never use them because of the upcharges. Okay, fair enough. Great. And they expect, I guess, applause or something. I'm not sure what the expectation is. It's like, dude, do it for whatever reason you do or don't want to do it. I don't actually care. That's completely okay. But understand that a lot of people submit to them anyway. Well, why would they do that? Because they understand the rules of engagement going in. That's like, and I'll give you this silly analogy here, but it's like going to an Italian restaurant and being angry that they won't serve you a burger. Well, why did you walk into an Italian restaurant? They're not going to give you a burger. Or why did you walk into the burger joint expecting pasta? Maybe they have it, maybe they don't, but I wouldn't go in expecting it. When it comes to these submission things, the whole upcharge thing, it's not like no one is telling you this in advance. It's not like you can't see it. It's not like well, how would I have ever known? It's like, well, it's been standard for a while. They've been doing it for a long time. If that's not something that works for you, it's not something that jives for you, may I offer you one of the other alternatives? We've got them right here. We got lovely logos and everything. Check it out. These guys have a pretty good turnaround time, pretty reasonable price. These guys right now have the lowest price on a bulk rate standard, and in my opinion, a really nice slab. Maybe don't do this one. Just my opinion. Maybe stay away from the last one. But the point is, I'm giving you two nice, viable options that are affordable, reasonable, and in a lot of cases, pretty solid. So you don't have to use this one. Use this one or this one. Go ahead. This one doesn't even have upcharges on a lot of the stuff. So there you go. You hate upcharges so much, use this one. So why aren't more of you using it? Why is this not triple digits every single month automatically by default? Why not? You don't have an excuse anymore. Now the prices. Go ahead. Send them 5,000 cards. Send them 10,000 cards. But you haven't done it. Even when they were the only game in town. Even when they had positioned themselves very well, and PSA had a gigantic backlog and everything. You didn't do it. It's not my fault. I just point out what's there, and that's just what it is. That's why I say people are not rational, and people can tell you what they want. That isn't necessarily what they want. You're voting with the dollars, and you're telling me that it's not that important to you, this stuff that you talked about. But you're very loud about it. That's why I kind of wanted to have a little bit of fun with this video. Again, this is mostly, some people won't take it as such, but I'm going to remind you now that a lot of this is tongue-in-cheek. I am pointing to this stuff because honestly, this is the conversations I have all the time. And the reason that I take the tack that I do is that, guys, I'm not looking at this emotionally here. Like, look, use whoever you want. Maybe none of those make sense to you. Maybe you're sitting there like, well, I would never pay to get anybody to grade my cards. Cool, man. Use a one touch, use a top loader, use a penny sleeve, throw it in a box. Do whatever works the best for you. I'm good with whatever. As long as it works for you, I'm happy for you. But the point is, don't come back with the same tired, well, I don't understand why. Well, here's why. Here's 2 reasons why. And there's a variety of others, but these are 2 really solid top line reasons why. You're trying to interject a rationality that isn't there. And you're asking people to tell you what they want when it comes time to spend money. That isn't what they're doing. That's why they're not doing that. And they haven't done it. Can the behavior change down the road? Sure. But a lot of times, honestly, a lot of times, more often than not, the behavior doesn't change. And that's neither good nor bad. It just is. People have to make their own decisions, especially now. They're going to be more price conscious. They're going to be probably having to think about these things a little bit more. So we'll see how that plays out going down the road. But don't concern yourself with necessarily, like, if it doesn't make sense to you, then go the other way. Be contrarian on that and just do that for your own purposes. And I think you'll be much happier. I think you'll get a much more satisfying hobby experience out of that. And just proceed with what makes the most sense for your purposes. That would be my suggestion to you. And I think you'll get more out of it that way. Anyway, I wanted to do a little bit more of an old school kind of talking piece, just going through a couple of different things. You don't have to agree with me. I get it. More than welcome to engage on it in the chat in terms of the comment section a little bit if you want to chat about that. Otherwise, more videos coming up on the channel. We'll do the live stream on Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, talking about whatever's going on hobby-wise this week. Maybe we'll talk about UX myths. But anyway, I do have the links on these in the description for you if you want to check these out. Have a little fun with them, and I do recommend some of the books they put in here because some of them are actually quite good. And I think you'll get some interesting insights out of them if you want to check them out on your own time. Anyway, that's it for me for now. Thanks very much. We'll catch you in the next one.